do, do, do. It's time for some reaction on yeah, Carloz Sainz, what he will be doing 2025 from oh my god, P1, and after that it will be some oh, the race. They have something new about yeah, the F1 FIA problem. I don't know. We will see how big problem that really is. But yeah, and I don't know really what I will be doing in Minecraft. Yeah, it's probably whatever. I mean, my plan is to find some more buckets, but the way I was trying to get buckets is from wandering traders, and the first wandering trader I saw didn't give any buckets, so it's not going well. And I need to like 16 buckets. I want more, but 16 is what I need to get managed training. To at least get all the special fishes in the safety. So let's start see what their thoughts about 2025 is.
2025, Ingo Sainz Carloz will wear. Tom Belling.
Okay, let's see. My thoughts is, I mean, people said Red Bull, and I mean, the thing, that Max will go to Mercedes is really wild. And now it's lightning. Now I can sleep. So in my opinion, Red Bull seat will not be free in 2025. The only free seat that he could maybe, that was a really fast sleep, could be Mercedes, but I don't. It feels weird for him just to go there. I mean, I feel like they have enough people that they could try out. I mean, if they still are bad, why not test the one of the junior drivers? And so Sauber is probably the only. Oh no, he could go to Williams. Like, if he want a good car. Oh my god. Don't say it's, no, it's not one of the best, but it's almost one of the best. What are you doing up here? You should go back. we can have them out. Yeah, so if you want a good car really fast, Williams will probably be a good seat for him. But if you want a bad seat, but maybe in the future will be good, then Sauber is the more or less the only choice. But let's see what they have for.
You are here, we are here, we're in an off week, we're ready to talk about the man of the moment, Carloz Sainz, and
Yep.
I feel as though our opinions that we might have chefed
Is super washed.
previously for the 2025 grid might have shifted maybe slightly,
It's
because we
washed.
are fully going to break down each team that there is a possibility that he will go to, and our ratings out of 10. So let's begin.
And Haas, I feel like Oliver Behrman have a seat secured, hopefully.
With Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber, I've given a 6 out of 10 of how likely I think this will happen. It's gone down a lot. I'm not saying it with my chest anymore. I'm sort of whispering it, if anything, mainly because I don't want him to go, at least for next year. For 2026, I think it still could happen, and I think if we were grading that, it would be higher. But I think in this interim year, there are better options out there, much better options. So, yeah, it just depends if those other big options open a seat up for him.
And I will also say, for 2025, Sauber is worse than Williams. But if you're planning for the future, 2026, maybe you need to go in that early.
Because they also have either drivers in contract or potentially other drivers in the wings.
So for Sauber, I've gone for a 7 out of 10. The fascinating thing here is, and I think this is why my opinion keeps changing and I don't know what's best, and I'm sure this is going through every driver's head as well. So many drivers are out of option for next year, but then there's an entire regulation change. And that is what makes it such a bizarre thing, because if he'd lost his seat now, I would probably say Audi, yeah, it's worth a punt. But the way Stake have gone this year, they're not going to be any good next year. Like, no chance. And they're also floundering in pit stops and things like that. And it would just be like, well, do I want the kind of embarrassment of a year of being 16th every single race?
Why not?
Hoping that Audi are any good when there might be other options at other bigger teams that you know are good, and it's less of a risk. So that's why my opinion sort of changed a little bit. I'm not as confident that he'll go to Audi. And
Icing eller inte icing?
Tjenare! Hur är läget?
Ingen fara. Han har bara fått en släng av SHL.
Oddset, stolt huvudsponsor till SHL.
And that kind of bodes the question, but it's probably for another podcast, is who does take that risk when there's a gap of essentially being in an awful team that could get better in a year's time, but we don't know.
If, for example, Bottas was making Q3, fighting on the outer edges of the points perhaps, and showing some kind of promise, there might be a thought in his mind of betting himself in the team. But he's much better than that. We know that. We can see that. He don't need to bed his roots in a team that's clearly in a bit of a shambles at the moment. If anything, steer clear, let Audi take over, and then go and have a little look.
If you look at Lewis Hamilton as an example, that in 2013 he moved from McLaren to Mercedes, and it was this big like, oh my god, why has he left McLaren to go to Mercedes? Mercedes were like 4th or 5th best team, and McLaren were like the 2nd best team. But to go that far down the grid and hope they're suddenly just going to like a light switch in 2026 be Audi and we're going to win and be amazing, is a risk, massive risk.
This video is sponsored by...
No, go away! Oh my god, the creepy sound afterwards. This I would say, I think Carlos Sainz going to Mercedes is more highly likely to happen than he going to Red Bull.
Let's move to Mercedes next. And I'm going to lock in a whopping 9 out of 10. Yeah, originally I was thinking, no, what's the point in going to Mercedes for a year and then moving team somewhere else, because they've put all their eggs into Kimi Antonelli's basket and they really want this, young and up-and-coming star. But Carlos Sainz is probably the kind of driver you need to slot into that Mercedes seat next year. If you put Kimi Antonelli in there, it is one of the biggest rolls of the dice since Max Verstappen in a Toro Rosso. And obviously that paid dividends eventually. Didn't really at the start with the amount of happy crashes that he had. But I just feel as though Mercedes need to get a strong signing. If Carlos is the biggest talking point this year and he continues to do well, then it makes sense, in my opinion.
I've gone for a 3 out of 10 for his move.
What? Oh my, is this copying Max Verstappen?
That is glorious. That is the most we've ever disagreed.
I think
by
it actually
a
is.
Country mile.
Yes, gone for a 3 out of 10.
Why?
And that is because if there was no future and Formula One ended after 2025, I think the best option is Carlos Sainz and George Russell in a Mercedes. I think that is actually a really solid, good lineup. Would be great for Mercedes. But like you say, I do... They're obviously mentioning Kimi Antonelli a lot. It's very early stages. However, it's quite clear that Toto doesn't want to lose him like he did with Max Verstappen. And the reason for me giving a 3 is because if Carlos Sainz went there, it seems like it would be his seat for 3 or 4 years. Like, he's got age on his side, whereas as if Fernando Alonso went there, he's going to be there 1 year, maybe 2. I know we joke that he's going to go forever, but, Carlos Sainz could, in theory, have age on his side and stay for another 10 years, and then Kimi Antonelli doesn't have a seat. George Russell, you've got 2 drivers with youth on their side that can go for a very long time, and then they have that same problem they did with Max, where they've got no seat to put him in. He's too much of a quick fix, and I think he's an incredibly good quick fix for them, but it also creates that problem that Toto said that he had in the past.
Listen up, you wonderful lot. The P1 Live show is back in town in...
Oh my god, so many washed ads in this fucking washed clip.
You're so good at that. Link in the description if you'd like to come along and see us. As I say, the 11th, the 12th and the 14th. The big one is in London on the 14th. We'd love to see you there. Link in the description. Okay, let's move on to Red Bull.
I'm going for an 8 out of 10.
8. Yeah, sure.
For Red Bull. Yeah, I can see it happening. I think they've always been that team where they promote a young driver, but last time, Christian Horner's decision was to promote Sergio Perez and someone outside the stable, and now I feel like it could happen again. Now, obviously, of course, it all relies on Sergio Perez and how he goes about it, but Red Bull are a brutal team, I guess, and
Not that Max Verstappen will leave Red Bull to go to Mercedes.
I think about it, the more I could just see that Red Bull link working again.
If they want someone to promote, why not promote Ricciardo
again?
Wow, okay, here we go. Disagreement number 2. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 for Red Bull, mainly because Sergio has had a very good start to the year. I don't think Red Bull shakes everything up even more. They've got so much instability in the team at the moment. I think moving that second driver around as well, if Perez is doing enough for next year as well, where you'd assume the Red Bull is going to be quickest again, and they don't really want to unsettle Max. It's such an interesting topic purely because of the amount of moving parts that could happen. Of course, there's lots in the news about Max Verstappen leaving Red Bull. Then probably Carlos will go. But
a lot of news, yeah.
if we're just
why?
talking about Max staying here and
Nothing
then that
better to
second
write
seat,
about.
I think that Perez will perform enough. Judging from last year and what he did, and Red Bull were like, yeah, you can stay for another year. I think he will have a better overall year this year than last year, and therefore they keep him on for 2025, and then big changes maybe start to happen for 26 in the new regs. Okay, we move on now to Aston Martin.
I'll go
Oh
for
wait, what did he say about Red Bull?
For mainly, okay, here we go. Disagreement number 2. I've gone for a 4 out of 10
Yeah, true. For
Red
man.
Bull. Mainly,
No. This is P1. Ah, the other guy's name. I have more washed opinion.
because Sergio has had a very good start to the year. I don't think Red Bull shakes everything up even more. They've got so much instability in the team at the moment. I think moving that second driver around as well, if Perez is doing enough for next year as well, where you'd assume the Red Bull is going to be quickest again, and they don't really want to unsettle Max. It's such an interesting topic purely because of the amount of moving parts that could happen. Of course, there's lots in the news about Max Verstappen leaving Red Bull. Then probably Carlos will go. But if we're just talking about Max staying here and then that second seat, I think that Perez will perform enough. Judging from last year and what he did, and Red Bull were like, yeah, you can stay for another year. I think he will have a better overall year this year than last year, and therefore they keep him on for 2025, and then big changes maybe start to happen for 26 in the new regs. Okay, we move on now to Aston Martin.
I'll go for a 2 out of 10. Just the fact that in case Fernando Alonso decides to retire, I don't think
Or
it's...
go to Merc.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might want to up that up.
Oh, no. Actually, the more I think about it, the more...
Yeah.
Maybe a 4.
I mean, let's see, Aston Martin. No, not for 2025. I mean, come on. Why would Alonso leave for 2025?
4. Just because Aston Martin...
Just pick a number, please.
Okay, I've changed to a 4. And it's actually going up and up the more I think about it, because if Fernando Alonso retires...
Yeah, but why would they do that for 2025?
He will... Yeah, he goes to Merc, retires, whatever.
Yeah, he is in a good car. Go to a sports car. Yeah,
He's the perfect driver, actually, Aston Martin, to put in a top driver. 11 out of 10. No, no, it's still a 4 because it relies on Fernando Alonso leaving.
Lovely stuff. I also changed my mind aggressively when I realised that if Fernando leaves or goes to Merc, then that's the seat for Carlos. So I've gone for a 5 out of 10 due to that reasoning.
So, man, I feel like Sauber is still not the best option, but the most likely option.
I don't think for a second that Fernando will retire. I think that he'll be having his eyes set on that Merc seat. And again, it's about the moving parts. It's not whether Carlos would go to Aston. It's whether there's actually going to be a seat available. But, you know, Merc to Fernando. We've spoken about it before. Fernando to Merc even. Not Merc to... I mean, Merc would have to come to Fernando. I reckon that's how the negotiations
there's also
happen.
talk of Alonso to Red Bull now as well. That's rampant.
Yeah, Alonso to Red Bull. All this, I would say, washed opinions, but yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like I've never seen Ricardo driving good or anything like that, but I still think he's more likely to be the one that gets promoted into Red Bull if Max for some reason leaves or if Perez is bad.
You know, it's just every driver is to every team pretty much at the top now.
What? Let's just get into a little bit of a fantasy land right now. If Fernando Alonso goes to Red Bull, what happens to you?
I would absolutely love that Alonso would maybe get a couple of wins during the year, but I don't think Alonso would beat Max in the Red Bull. The ages, if you put them in their primes together, it's a different story. But you know, say the Australian Grand Prix, for example, he'd be there winning the race, in my opinion. when Max is off the road. But wow, it would be something to behold.
Tommy, I think you have the result of our poll ready to share with everyone. And before you do that, I feel like we've missed one thing, which I've seen a few people
Alpine?
mutter, which is no.
I think I would rather go to Sauber. Sauber F1 team kick Sauber than Alpine.
Oh, which is, will he have a year out?
Yeah, an option, I guess.
Probably
And
not.
my grade for that is zero.
Oh, yeah,
no
zero.
chance. He's got so much. I mean, we just saw it with the surgery. He loves Formula One more than life itself. He knows what it's like to be. It's all about.
No,
Casino.
that time.
Snabb och enkel registrering.
You go away.
Musical chairs, right? But you have to be in the game in order to have the best chance of getting one of those chairs. So
You don't.
yeah, for me, it's zero.
Yeah, 100%. You don't do what he did with his road to recovery to get back in that car and win the race. To be like, no, I could take a year out. He's driving better than he ever has, and yeah, I think.
I mean, maybe for last race. And then last race that happened, but... I mean, it only have been 3 races. So, and he's already on his highest level. That's interesting.
If he did take a year out or didn't have a seat, I think Formula One might as well liquidate, because it's a massive problem if he can't get a seat and this whole sport is broken.
Wow. Wowee. And also, I feel as though another team we should have included.
That I would say, true, if Kevin Magnussen and Logan Scarlett is still in the Formula One, then I would really say that's something wrong with the Formula One.
Included in this, because there's been so much ridiculous chatter about it. Ferrari. Are they regretting signing
No,
Lewis Hamilton? And they're going
not.
to tear up his contract and be like, no, Carlos, come back. We've made a mistake. I'm sorry. 0.
Yeah, imagine they're like, just kidding, Lewis.
I do find that very interesting that people are genuinely thinking that Ferrari are regretting signing Lewis Hamilton, which is absolutely
They are
bonkers. Right, Tommy, share the poll with us.
The believers. Is
Okay,
Cyan
so we've
Copium.
had 13,000 votes, 61% for Red Bull,
Oh,
25% Mercedes, 8% Sauber, which is very low.
That is very low.
I think if you'd have asked that before the season and said Sauber, I think that's probably looking at more like 30-40%, but it shows that if you're having 6 day-long pit stops and just floundering at the back, it's not looking good for them.
Absolutely, and that pretty much sums up that.
Wow. So this was really nothing. Just a waste of time.
Podcast on Carlos Sainz and where he might go. Let us know on social media or in the YouTube comments, wherever you might be, where you think he's going to go and your reasons why. We'd love to hear them. Tommy, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are thank you for basically listening to 25 minutes of me and Matt pointless chat to discover that Carlos Sainz is actually going to Aston Martin, and it makes perfect sense. And Carlos Sainz to Aston Martin, here we go.
Wow, amazing how you've changed your opinion on the internet, Tommy. That is wild. Get
Not
ready to be
allowed.
crucified. That is it. Thank you, everybody. Lots of love. See you soon. Bye.
Oh my god. Oh shit. Oh god damn it. Okay, now I god damn it. Well, I can do a recap. Let's see. Was it 4 points? Going to Sauber was not likely. Let's see, Tom don't think on Mercedes, think more on Red Bull, and Matt think more on Mercedes, and then Red Bull, let's see, what's more? Yeah, but oh my god, this was almost nothing. Just go away with that. Guess no, man. And we will continue with even more bad stuff. The race. Why F1 relationship with the FIA is more toxic than ever. And let's see what fucking much opinion I have.
Formula One's off-track controversies show no sign of abating in 2024. What's more, the string of negative headlines has exposed F1's lack of leadership at a time when it's under fire on and off track. The latest big story is F1 Academy Managing Director Susie Wolff filing a criminal complaint in France. That was lodged back on March the 4th, but only recently revealed publicly via social media. Wolff's defamation complaint relates to what she calls statements made about me by the FIA last December. For those of you who have forgotten what happened then, and who can blame you given there have been so many controversies, this was when the FIA said it was looking into what it described as a claim of information of a confidential nature being passed to an F1 team principal from a member of FOM personnel. FOM, of course, is Formula One Management, owned by F1 commercial rights holder Liberty Media. That was announced on December the 6th. 2 days later, it was confirmed that there was no ongoing investigation and that the FIA is satisfied that FOM's compliance management system is robust enough to prevent any unauthorised disclosure of confidential information. So what was this all about? Well, Susie Wolff was not named publicly by the FIA, neither was husband Toto Wolff, team
So there should be no problem.
Principal of Mercedes, but media reports following the FIA's initial statement identified them as the parties involved.
Okay,
so
then it's the media's fault, not the FIA fault. So blame yourself for that.
Implication was that information had been passed from FOM to Mercedes by Susie Wolff to Toto. Mercedes later referred in a statement about this to an off-record briefing that linked this investigation to the Wolffs. The other F1 teams had also issued a flurry of statements denying having lodged any complaint regarding the allegation. They also professed their support for Wolff in her F1 Academy role. That was after the FIA's initial statement that it was looking into confidential information being shared. The FIA's announcement there was no longer an ongoing investigation understandably did not satisfy Wolff. She suggested that she might have been collateral damage in an unsuccessful attack on somebody else or the target of an attempt to discredit me personally. Wolff says her criminal complaint is because of the lack of transparency or accountability in relation to the conduct of the FIA and its personnel in this matter. She also stressed the importance of calling out what she called improper behaviour and holding people to account. As she put it, whilst some may think silence absolves them from responsibility, it does not. As this is a criminal complaint, this case ups the ante when it comes to the ongoing friction between F1 teams and the FIA. As always, the wheels of justice turn slowly. To lodge the complaint, Wolff will have compiled a dossier of evidence. Crucial to this will be proving that the FIA was indeed responsible for identifying Susie and Toto Wolff as the parties involved. If that link can be proven, and the Wolffs must be confident of doing so given Susie has launched this action, then it could cause some big problems for the FIA and President Mohammed Ben Sulayem. But those hoping for an epic courtroom drama full of twists, turns and surprise witnesses will be disappointed. This won't be conducted with a cinematic flourish. Instead, an investigator is appointed to review the evidence provided. They will also gather their own evidence, which should include gathering witness statements. It will likely be several months at least before the outcome is known. The key question it's hoped the investigation will answer will be why the FIA looked into this in the first place, whether or not it did indeed brief any media outlets, and in doing so...
Yeah, they looked into something. That's highly disturbing. Trying to act like a... Yeah, I don't know. What do you mean? They did their job? Yes? No? What?
Identify those involved, and if, as a result, Susie Wolff was indeed defamed. The question of whether a complaint was lodged to trigger the investigation or the FIA started it unilaterally following media reports could also fall within the scope of the investigation, although that's far from certain. But in the wider F1 context, it could bring some welcome transparency at a time when the simmering political war between the FIA and Liberty Media is at the heart of almost continuous controversy. Whatever the verdict is, it could have enormous repercussions for the FIA and F1.
Why?
This case in isolation is remarkable, but unfortunately is far from the only problem F1 faces. That's because Wolff is far from the only person in F1 to call for greater transparency when it comes to the FIA's activities. McLaren's CEO, Zak Brown, has been at the forefront of these calls, saying in Australia that we're living in 2024, not 1984, which means total
Yeah, but he has also a problem with Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team, so should you actually believe or care whatever he have to say? I think not.
Brown's Orwellian reference was apt given the wider perception of F1 as a somewhat dystopian world right now. And he's far from the only one to issue repeated demands for transparency, not just when it comes to the Wolff versus FIA case, but also to the recent internal investigations into Ben Sulayem, which we'll get to later, and Red Bull's much publicised investigation into team principal Christian Horner's conduct. Transparency is one of those laudable things to call for, but the devil is in detail.
Transparency. I mean, they, like you say, they didn't mention who they looked into. The media did it, so maybe you should complain about the transparency about the media. Why did they start blaming your wife?
During the Friday press conference in Melbourne, I asked the 4 team bosses who are on the stand, so to speak, what needs to happen to deliver on that desire for transparency. They said it was about the correct process and trusting the governance. But as RB CEO Peter Beyer warned, transparency doesn't simply mean everyone knowing all of the details of what's going on. Instead, it's about enough being known to be fully confident the process has been followed correctly and that, crucially, the verdicts of internal investigations can therefore be trusted. And it's not just team bosses who are calling for that. Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton backed Susie Wolff's action.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton. I mean, he should back his team more. Or maybe he's back in his new team, Ferrari, more.
And praised her for taking it outside of the world of F1, i.e. to French courts. He argues that accountability is essential for fans. What's clear is that nobody is entirely convinced that due process really has been followed, and the lack of faith in the FIA means many struggle to take it on trust that it is governing as responsibly as F1 demands.
What's your biggest challenge to eating healthy?
It's time, having a busy schedule.
And how do you combat that?
I usually drink meal shakes when I don't have time to cook or meal prep. It doesn't replace a fresh home-cooked meal, but it helps me get complete nutrition even when I'm in a rush. There's no cooking or waiting, it's just 2 scoops, shake, and that's it.
Any specific brands that you've tried?
Scam ad. We need to make them pay.
Right?
I always recommend Plenty Shake by Jimmy Joy. It's developed by...
Oh my god, these same people. They did an ad outside and now they inside in the fucking podcast.
It has plant protein, all the essential vitamins and minerals, healthy carbs, and so much more.
And it's
only $1.43 per meal.
Wow, that would actually save me so much time and money.
It does. Jimmy Joy is...
Fuck do you do a podcast after you already talked to the person outside? Fuck, this is so weird.
Easiest way to eat healthy. You gotta try it out.
No. How about that? Yeah, there you have it. Outside. She act like she randomly talked to him. Oh my god, one more scam ad. So fucking bad ads. I hate them. And also, why film in so bad quality?
Prior to the Australian Grand Prix, the FIA announced that 2 investigations into the actions of President Mohammed Ben Sulayem concluded that claims against him were unsubstantiated. This followed investigations that lasted a month, including interviews with 11 witnesses. By coincidence, or perhaps by design, the press release revealing Ben Sulayem had been cleared was released on the same day as Wolff announced her criminal complaint. There were 2 allegations being investigated. The first was that Ben Sulayem attempted to influence the stewards to overturn a 10-second penalty that cost Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin Martin third place in the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. That penalty was indeed overturned, meaning Alonso got third place back after stewards accepted there were precedents for Aston Martin having the rear jack connected to the car while a pit stop penalty was served. The second allegation was that Ben Sulayem attempted to interfere with the track certification process in Las Vegas last year to prevent the track being homologated. The FIA Compliance Department, supported by external advisors, conducted the investigation and compiled reports. Based on these, the FIA's six-person ethics committee was unanimous in its verdict that there was no evidence to substantiate either of these allegations. The FIA's press release about the verdict also praised Ben Sulayem's cooperation. As per the ethics committee rules, when the president is involved in a case, the reports were submitted to the FIA Senate for consideration. However, F1 teams were not given any information about the investigation besides what was publicly announced. Brown complained about that in Australia, saying nothing was explained to the teams, which relied on media reports and the FIA's press release.
Wow, someone going to the media reports again.
Information. Based on what the FIA has said, the investigation was conducted according to the process laid out in its statutes. However, given the lack of transparency about how the evidence was weighed up, in particular that of the whistleblower, is that really good enough? While the FIA stresses the independence of such investigations, to the watching world it seems worryingly like an organisation marking its own homework. Therefore, it's surely in the best interests of the FIA to further increase transparency to demonstrate that is indeed the case. Ben Sulayem has defended himself and the FIA, hitting out against the allegations in a letter he recently sent to members. This claimed the complaints against him were motivated by the desire to undermine him and the FIA. He stressed his commitment to what he called an environment of transparency, accountability and unwavering integrity within the FIA. However, these investigations are just the latest in a long line of controversies surrounding Ben Sulayem. He has faced allegations of sexism and bullying, has clashed repeatedly with FOM over issues such as the new team application process that led to the FIA approving the Andretti bid and F1 itself rejecting it, and questioned the financial management of the FIA by the previous regime led by Jean Todt. It's important to stress that Ben Sulayem has at no stage been found guilty of any wrongdoing. However, he has consistently been engulfed in controversy. Given all of that, perhaps he would benefit from actively pushing for greater transparency over these matters, even if it's above what the FIA statutes demand, provided, of course, there is nothing to hide. With F1 constantly grabbing headlines for all the wrong reasons in 2024, the lack of leadership...
I mean, is it because of Formula 1, FIA? Or is it because of people like you that come up with so fucking bad opinions all the time that make it really hard to be transparent?
Has been shockingly exposed in recent months. That's not just a
Yeah, is because they're so bad or because the media is so bad?
Criticism of Ben Sulayem. F1 is effectively run by a combination of the FIA as the regulator and commercial rights holder Liberty Media. Amid all of this, Formula One Group CEO Stefano Domenicali has been conspicuous by his absence when it comes to tackling any of this publicly. Not only does F1 look terrible to the outside world in terms of the infighting in politics as the FIA and FOM grapple for power, but it also looks rudderless when it comes to the legitimate question marks over whether the working environment is as it should be for female staff, given the high-profile Red Bull investigation into Horner. An investigation that it must
be... this is not to make it is better. Talking like this, just, yeah, sure. It's the FIA and F1's problem, not the media's. Every day talk about something that maybe is nothing.
Stressed cleared him, but that continues to be a talking point because of the...
Yeah, I wonder why. Because the media is so fucking good and want true justice. Or is there a lot of false justice that the media are trying to promote?
Complainants appeal. F1's growth in recent years means that the true test of leadership comes when the tough questions are being asked.
Yeah,
but amid all this controversy combined with a predictable season on track, that public leadership has been entirely lacking. No wonder F1 looks terrible to the watching world. With some of the worst expectations of the F1 bubble seemingly confirmed by the inaction and paralysis of leadership, it's been a disastrous few months. Hopefully, Susie will...
And who thinks this? I mean, it is just the people in the media that think this is, oh my god, it's This is so horrible. How can FIA and F1 keep doing this?
Force action really can bring about a change to ensure the transparency and accountability that is in everyone's interest really is there.
Yeah, the media's interest.
Det måste ha den här på väggen hemma.
Like I thought that was fucking worthless. He gave actually nothing. And sadly, this will continue with some more of the washed opinions. Fitzpatrick.
The Athletic.
The race is on.
The race is on, and Carloz Sainz took his and Ferrari's first victory of the season in Australia after Max Verstappen was undone by brake troubles, while Fernando Alonso was given a penalty for driving in a potentially dangerous manner. But would it...
It wasn't dangerous driving. I mean, George Russell drove more dangerously. I mean, he crashed out, so...
Been business as usual had Red Bull not hit trouble? I'm Ed Straw, and joining us to answer that question and many more are Mark Hughes and Samarth Canal. Well, Mark, we've been in Australia for the past week. We did the earlier podcast where we got together before the race. This has lived up to expectations, hasn't it? The Australian Grand Prix is always a great fun event.
No.
It is, yeah. It's just a lovely venue, especially when the sun's shining. And it's almost a bonus when you get a good race. And this one, it wasn't vintage, but it certainly had its moments. And
No.
yeah, it gave us that nice break in the previous routine of outcomes.
Absolutely. It's not about Max Verstappen not winning, because don't want to see them doing well, but it's just good to have variety. You always want as much variety as possible. And Samarth, I think this is your first Australian Grand Prix on site, isn't it? Or have I got the details
100%.
wrong?
Yeah, so I'm not waking up at 5 a.m. in my pokey bedroom in London and turning on the computer all bleary-eyed. I'm bleary-eyed, and it's daytime. So no, it's quite nice to be out, but it's lovely in Melbourne. It's been a really great weekend, really interesting, and it's actually one of the tracks I don't think gets enough credit. I think it's an interesting track. I think it's
Interesting track. I mean, it made so Alonso can make George Russell crash out. That was really interesting.
an interesting circuit. People forget it is a street circuit, so lots going on. It was an interesting race for sure. As Mark said, I'm not sure if it was one for the ages, but it was really interesting for sure.
Yeah, all about storylines. There's plenty of storylines for us to get into in this podcast.
Nothing
So, Mark,
happened,
let's
yeah.
get into it with
That's
the usual
storyline.
question. So, how did the Australian Grand Prix play out?
Really
Well,
boring.
it played out in a way that it was dominated by the retirement of Max Verstappen. For the brake caliber was not releasing properly from the disc, which, as you probably saw, caused a big fire on the back of the car. And that was left the way clear for Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. But I think it was a shame in a way that Verstappen did retire, because every indication was that Sainz could have run with Verstappen here. And the Ferrari was genuinely good with the tyres, because the main constraint with the tyres this weekend was graining on all three compounds. And it wasn't the usual heat deck that was determining the level of the different cars. It was how well they were controlling the graining. And the last time we had a race like that, you might remember, was Las Vegas last year. And again, the Ferrari was very good then. It was only an inopportunely timed safety car that lost Leclerc that race. And this is a much better Ferrari than that one, even relative to the Red Bull, having improved. So I think there was nothing to suggest that the Red Bull had better tyre deck, because it wasn't being limited by the thermal things as it usually is, but was by the graining. And Sainz, and particularly Sainz, but the Ferrari in general, but particularly Sainz, had a very good handle on that, and that was clear from as early as Friday. And Red Bull had a scrappy Friday, although they'd got the car into some sort of sweet spot by the end of qualifying. It was, still it wasn't a vintage Red Bull Verstappen performance. So they were scratching a little bit, and I think there was every indication that this would have been a really, really close contest between Verstappen and Sainz. Maybe Verstappen would have won it anyway, because one of the advantages you have is clear air is an even bigger advantage when you're dealing with tyre graining, and he did win the start. But then again, Sainz was in his DRS zone and could quite conceivably have put that pass on him anyway. So
anyway,
yeah,
or not. What's opinion?
I think it's a shame in a way that we lost that contest. But anyway, the outcome was that we had this this lovely storyline of Sainz winning the Grand Prix. After having spent the previous 10 days in post-operation recovery in bed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a tough couple of weeks for him. He did say before the race weekend that in the first week of the recovery there were times when he thought, there's no way I'm going to be ready for this. And then the second week, once he was in Australia, he was feeling better, still not 100%. But it's interesting, isn't it, to look at Perez's performance, because he had a fairly subdued run to 5th place. He made the comparison with Las Vegas as well and the track surface. So I guess, Samarth, we can kind of say, well, Perez was able to breeze through to P2 in the first couple of races. Much harder work here. So applying the Verstappen offset there perhaps supports the idea that maybe there could have been an interesting race if Verstappen hadn't had the problem.
Yeah, I think ironically it probably would have been one of the races in recent memory where Verstappen's inclusion would have made it more exciting. And that's not a slight on him at all. That it's just one of those weird things. And I think touching on what Mark's saying, Perez cited the tarmac basically as the issue. So it's the surface, and it's weird that it is a car trait that Red Bull will now have to look at. I think
yes, the brakes didn't work as they should have done, so yes.
I'm not sure. Suzuka's completely different in this regard, isn't it? It's a high tyre wear circuit.
Very high load in terms of the lateral load, yeah.
So in terms of that, what do you think? How do you think Red Bull will fare there then? Is it a similar problem?
No, it's a more traditional problem. I think you're more likely to see the previous Red Bull pattern of the advantage increasing on race day compared to qualifying. But who knows?
That's an admirable attempt to build up some excitement for Japan there. I like that.
Oh. I'm sorry I batted that down a bit, but you might be right anyway. But that's how it looks at the moment.
And the brake problem, what do we know about it? I have to admit the fact that it happened immediately, and the fact that we did see in the garage Verstappen doing a little sort of pointing to his head, and he seemed to say the word stupid. My lip reading skills aren't brilliant, but it sounded like it may have been some kind of mistake that led to
it sounds like a preparation problem. We do know that it was a sticking caliper on the right rear, and so it wasn't releasing fully, which gave him that funny little wiggle through turn 3 at the beginning of lap 2, which is what enabled Sainz to get a run on him. But it's also the heat built up within the cake tins, which are sealed, so the heat's not able to escape, and you'll have seen them explode as he drove it into the pit lane. Everything's pointing to a preparation error.
And mistakes happen. It's the fact that that's so unusual for Red Bull says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm just going to add that it doesn't smell great when you're around the vicinity of burning tyres.
You were getting in trouble for rummaging around the back of their garage, weren't you?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, I was just trying to find a spare brake caliper for my Mazda MX-5. No, I was out there. I went out, and it was a smoking tyre, and everyone was just it was just there. It was a very surreal thing. Lots of Red Bull engineers looking at it, and Pirelli people, and no one could really touch it because it was scalding hot, but it didn't smell great, and I probably shouldn't have breathed in too much of that. But there we go. It was an interesting.
You were up close smelling it.
I wasn't there. I wasn't there to sniff it, Mark. I'm not that
Sounds
odd.
like you
I was
were-
just wanting to take a picture out of
I'm
curiosity.
surprised you got chased away.
I didn't get chased away, really. I thought it was
Surprised
fine.
they still let you in the paddock.
There was some gesticulation in one of your photos.
I think that guy was joking, though. I'm not
okay.
sure. Yeah, there was a Red Bull engineer who was like waving people away, but I think he realised that he couldn't stem the tide.
Giving up on it. But yeah, that just shows the lengths that you go to get those good photos. I'm sure we threw them up on our social media platforms somewhere. But let's talk.
Sälj din bil snabbt, tryggt och enkelt med Wheelaway. Emma skapade en annons på några minuter och fick in flera bud från seriösa bilhandlare. Hon accepterade budet som passade henne bäst. Sälj din bil the easy way med Wheelaway.
Yeah, true. Scammad.
En underbart god chokladsmak och krispighet. Nu som flingor. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat cereal.
Talk a little bit about Carloz Sainz because I think 16 days before winning this race, Carloz Sainz was under the knife, or to be more precise, under the laparoscope, if I pronounce that correctly, for an appendectomy. Of course, it's basically keyhole surgery, for want of a better word. But how impressed were you with his weekend performance, both in terms of just what he did and that wider context of his recovery?
Yeah, so I think he wasn't completely comfortable. He said he was feeling stiff. So when he got into the car on Friday, there was still a question of whether he'd be able to do all the other sessions. And that's something that Fred Vasseur, team principal of Ferrari, said today. He said, you know, Carlos wasn't 100% sure. But when he got in, it took him 2 laps to get back up to speed. And I think that underlines not only Carlos's quality, but the quality that F1 drivers have now, where they can just do that flawlessly, and how fit they are. And their recovery is excellent. And you know, that is a testament to the motorsport as we know it. And Carloz Sainz is no different. He's one of the drivers that can just jump in, do the job, and he did it very well. It's very impressive. I don't think he put a foot wrong today. I know that Leclerc was pretty close to him, and I think they were identical. And Carlos was perhaps, you know, enjoying the free air as well. And he only finished like a couple of seconds ahead of Leclerc, but he was excellent. They were both excellent. And if you add the recovery in, I'm not sure if either of you have had appendicitis, by the way.
No.
No, I can't imagine it's very fun to recover from having your insides car open, having a part of you taken out, and then jumping into an F1 car where, you know, 4 to 5 Gs. Yeah, you know, Fred Vasseur said it was amazing. He was very happy. He did try and play down Carlos a bit, though, because he knows that he's going to start getting questions as to why he's letting Carlos go at the end of the season. So that was the interesting thing for me today.
Well, it's the funny thing, isn't it? He's the man without a drive, and he's the man of the weekend in terms of his on-track performance. And this has certainly raised the question of where he's going to end up being. But yeah, he was very interesting actually before the weekend. Sainz talking about the surgery and the recovery, and he'd spoken to Alex Albon, who told him to expect a weird feeling, and that's exactly what Sainz said he had. And he had, I think it was 3 incisions it required to do the appendectomy. So Sainz was very positive about the medical care he'd had and everything. And obviously he was very aware that he had the privilege of focusing fully on his recovery, whereas, you know, the ordinary mortals, non-elite sports people wouldn't quite have that luxury. But it was impressive. I actually ran into him as he was heading out the paddock earlier, and you could see he wasn't quite moving right. He was a little bit stiff. He was fine otherwise.
Oh, yeah. I've seen one clip. Oh, man, he just looked like he's walking for the first time.
He wasn't.
After 3
he wasn't
years.
walking in a relaxed manner. Let's put it that way. But so that to me showed he wasn't 100%, as he said. And I think, although it's not the most far-reaching, biggest surgery in the world, I was impressed with what he did. But it was interesting, Mark, because the comparison with Leclerc in qualifying was very interesting, and I think it underlined something about the relative merits of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, didn't it?
Yeah, when it's a case of tracking changes through of the track and the implication that has on how you're using the car and how you're driving the car and how you're using the tyres, he's always super sharp at that. And this was a classic case of that, because the temperature variation was considerable. The way the tyres work and was the balance between the front and rear, the way you had understeer in a certain part of the lap and oversteer in a different part of the lap, and how the wind direction changed the emphasis of that, either turning it down a bit or exaggerating it. you had to be on top of all those things. Leclerc just gets in the car and just drives it, and is fantastic at doing that. And if the conditions are stable, he will find that last little bit, because he's got a baseline, and then he's able to delve and just grab something deeper. You know, the sort of thing that you used to see, you know, Ayrton Senna do, or Michael Schumacher, or Gilles Villeneuve. That he has that sort of ability where you can just go beyond on a one-off lap once he's established the baseline. But when it's changing like that all the time, you need a Sainz to be keeping on top of it, and that's how he became the cutting edge of Ferrari in qualifying. He was more on top of the situation than Charles was.
And speaking to Leclerc after qualifying, you could see he knew what the problem was, because he talked about the fact that, well, I think I messed up on the tyre preparation. Everything I was doing wasn't quite clean. There was always some limitation front or the back.
Bit too much front winging in the end.
Exactly, yeah, they were trying to get the fronts working, and then you pay the price. And I think he just knew it wasn't all quite adding up. It's probably frustrating, because this happens on a semi-regular basis during their alliance at Ferrari. And I think it's one of the reasons why you would never say that bringing Lewis Hamilton in is not a positive move and not an upgrade. But Sainz brings some very good complementary skills to Leclerc, which is why I really like the balance of that lineup. So I guess the question, Samantha, is where's Sainz going to end up? He's boosted his market value yet further, hasn't he?
Well,
I mean, somewhat yes. But if nobody cares about it, then it will change nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll end up at a top team. Not a top team, but
top team. Is that Stake Formula 1 team? No. Stake F1 team, Kick Sauber.
Competitive team. I mean, he's a top driver, that's the thing, and he's proved it today. I would hate to see him end up somewhere that isn't performing, so I think he'll end up somewhere competitive. I mean, he has to, right?
Oh shit. And that is Red Bull? Or is it Stake F1 team Kick Sauber?
The question is, who will be competitive when he goes there as well? I mean, there's all that. But yeah, this is a great advert for him. I mean, surely there'll be people knocking on his door to get him now.
Or not. Who knows? It could be no one that cares.
Right.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it'll be a Red Bull.
Well.
Yeah, the Red Bull. Still, I have not seen a record being good, but why would you not just promote him if you want to have him in the Red Bulls? In the... You have him in the Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team. So why not promote him to the Red Bull? But yeah, Carloz Sainz make more sense.
There was a little bit of Christian Horner hint in that direction, wasn't there?
There was.
Christian Horner, the one that you believe have done some horrible stuff to a woman. This guy that say he didn't, you believe in what he say. The fuck is this? Are you protecting Christian Horner now? Man, what side are you on? The women's side or the Christian Horner side? Fuck race.
He was asked about Tsunoda, and he changed the question around to, well, it's not about who's in the family already, it's about putting the best combination.
Yeah, the best combination. So that means the best they can put in. So if they can have Max Verstappen in it, I mean, they already said they don't need Carloz Sainz then, right?
Of drivers that's possible to get, and there's one very impressive unemployed driver just right there pointing at Sainz's lap traces. So yeah, I mean, already I've been thinking logically that's where he should be looking to go, and I think the logic works on both sides.
Yeah, very much so. Obviously, he's been linked with Aston Martin. Mercedes is another vacancy. Toto Wolff was asked about him, but
that I would say Mercedes sounds more like a way for him to go than Red Bull. I mean, before Carloz Sainz would get a Red Bull seat, you have first Ricciardo. If not that, Liam Lawson. If not that, who knows? Maybe Tsunoda. Probably not. No. Carloz Sainz probably before Tsunoda. But you have Liam Lawson and Ricciardo before that. And even before that, you still have Max and Perez. So before these four people is no longer in the Red Bull, then Carloz Sainz maybe can get a Red Bull seat.
Wolf was very careful not to specifically address Sainz. He said, yes, he's done well, but there's a number of candidates who have a wide range of strengths. So he was being quite cautious there.
I'd also add that today, two drivers who were in line for that Red Bull seat probably didn't have the best day, Ricciardo and Perez. So they were anonymous. I know they had their issues, but yeah, that probably helped Sainz's case even more.
Absolutely. Well, you know you need that sort of quality. And I think particularly on these weekends where things are a bit difficult, Red Bull would potentially have benefited from having Sainz in the car, given his...
Or maybe not. He could maybe could be really bad. And maybe easy win for Leclerc.
His abilities and his mastery of that sort of thing. And at worst, you know, Max Verstappen's a very clever driver in the way he approaches things. Why not have two drivers who can do that in your lineup? Let's now, Mark, talk about the other big talking point of the race, which was Alonso's penalty for what?
Yeah, oh my god. What did they say? Madness. Alonso's madness. Hashtag the race. Hashtag washed. I mean, if you think Alonso's drive was madness, I have a feeling that you could call Hamilton's drive in Silverstone 2021 more like a psychopath, right? The race? Don't you agree? Alonso, madness, Hamilton, psychopath, hashtag true.
Mounted to a brake test on George Russell. That led to Alonso being hit with a 20-second penalty that relegated him from 6th to 8th. And of course, Russell crashed. So can you explain what happened? And
0 points for Mercedes. They're looking good for Carloz Sainz drive 2025, right?
Why?
Or Alonso go to us from Aston Martin to Mercedes. Or for some reason, Max Verstappen from Red Bull to Mercedes. Yes.
He was penalised.
So, yeah, at the late stages, George was faster. He was chasing him down. Going into the penultimate lap, they came up to turn 6.
Same corner that Liam Lawson also crashed. No, not Liam Lawson. Dennis Hager in Formula 2. So maybe it's something with the corner that should maybe be changed.
That's stressing your counting there.
Yeah. Turn 6. Alonso braked 100 metres earlier than he had at any other point in the race.
And Russell didn't brake. So Russell's problem.
And he then...
Hey, interesting thing. Whose fault will it be if Russell crashed into Alonso? Would it be Alonso's fault that Russell didn't brake and just crashed into him? Or will it be Alonso's fault that Alonso wanted to brake somewhat early?
Went back on the throttle and then braked slightly a second time, only slightly, but it was enough to sort of disorient George and catch him by surprise and make him take evasive action, and that evasive action contributed to his running off into the gravel and into the tyre barrier and onto his side. And so, Alonso, it wasn't established that he did it deliberately to make George crash, and I don't think he would have done that, but I think he was being very, very defensive.
It's about compromising the run down to the next corner, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly that. And so I think it was determined that that could be classified as driving erratically, and therefore that was justification for the 26th.
And Julian Palmer didn't prove that Alonso have maybe done this to lose Hamilton the race before, driving slightly different as soon as Hamilton started to drive after him. And I believe Alonso had never done this to Michael Schumacher. Because why would you try to make the driver behind you have a harder time to pass you? I mean, it sounds like nothing that would ever happen in Formula 1. It's like Lewis Hamilton shown that you can maybe do that. The last race in 2016 against Nico Rosberg. Surely nobody does that.
Second penalty.
Yeah, that's a violation of the International Sporting Code, of course. So,
yeah, true.
do you think that's a fair cop, Mark?
I do, yes. Yeah, I do.
Lewis Hamilton have never done that also.
I think that probably... It wasn't like I think dirty driving would be too strong, but it was a little...
Sexy driving, maybe.
But, yeah, it was erratic, and it shouldn't be... You should be able to rely on...
Like Lewis Hamilton 2021, the psychopath drove so Max Verstappen crashed out, right? The race, you agree? Alonso was madness, Hamilton was psychopathic.
And the other guy to at least drive safely into an acceptable...
And he celebrated the win afterwards. Man, someone celebrating someone getting to the hospital. That's psychopathic.
No matter if it's the last lap and it's getting a bit desperate.
I think it's file under the dark
race.
arts. I think that might be the phrase. Any dissent from you there, Samarth, on the penalty?
No, completely agree with you guys. Well, the brake issues that Alonso said he had after the race.
You need to make sure you have some proof that maybe there were some problems in case something happens.
Look at the telemetry, and did you find anything there?
There were two distinct brake applications. It does look very odd. Scott Mitchell-Malm, who's following the race from afar, had dug that out, and he sent that to me, and I said, that doesn't look great.
Yeah, and it was also the fact that it was the first application came so early. It was like really, really early. And yeah, you can do that, but you can't just dismiss the fact there's a car, with its nose right on your gearbox when you do it. So yeah,
just one of those things, and maybe Alonso just going that little bit too far. It's his competitive approach, isn't it? He's ruthless. He'll go to those limits, and once in a while perhaps he goes a little bit too far, but it didn't cost him a huge amount in the end, because this wasn't a brilliant weekend for Aston Martin. So he finished 8th in the end, and Lance Stroll in the end picked up 6th place. So it didn't actually even make that big a difference to Aston Martin's points haul, but it did help Yuki Tsunoda gain a place. He finished 7th in the end. Let's move on to the other.
Lyssna på mig nu. Mitt råd för att få den bästa räntan är att flirta lite med din bankman. Lät ett leende.
Du, vad är den lägsta räntan?
Go out.
Podium finisher now, Mark. The first podium finish of the season for McLaren. Lando Norris third ahead of Oscar Piastri. Encouraging for the team that as the tracks move further towards the strengths of the car, then it's getting closer to the pace of Ferrari. So that's pretty positive, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, and they were close enough to put some pressure on Leclerc's Ferrari. They did it very well as a team. They used the pincer movement on him to keep applying undercut pressure on him. And you need to be quite close in performance to be able to do that. And yeah, it's we saw Sainz had a little bit of an edge over Leclerc, but that was just a small difference, and the McLaren was nearly there on Leclerc's level. And this is a track where we think the Ferrari was probably close to the Red Bull level. So, yeah, I think this the particular demands of this track this weekend, I think, have brought those three cars closer together. And I think its only real weakness this weekend is how much it loses in the DRS zone. So in qualifying, it's maybe 4/10 off, but in the race, when you're not in the DRS zones, it's much more competitive, and it's there's always a bit of a trade-off between how much DRS do you want, and then how much low drag do you want when not in DRS mode, and they've chosen a certain way. But in general, the car's still good and very good in the quick stuff, and it's quite aero efficient. So, yeah, encouraging, but and I think it'll be very good at Suzuka. That's a really good circuit configuration for it. But yeah, I'm not hopeful yet of it indicating that it's on an ever upward trajectory. I think it might be a similar pattern to last year in terms of being circuit specific.
Yeah, it's looking that way. Suzuka will be interesting. Andrea Stella, their team principal, was talking about that. He said, well, this is a step from what we've seen before towards what's good for us, and Suzuka is another step. So they're interested to see where they are. But again, he talked about it's a 1 year project to tackle all their weaknesses, which includes that straight line speed deficit with the DRS open. In fact, their straight line speed with the wing closed is generally pretty good. Yeah. It's with the DRS open that they lose out, and that long slow corner weakness that's dogged them for quite a few years. And yeah, I think Norris overall was the stronger of the two McLaren drivers. Yes, Piastri was ahead and let him pass, but that was a strategic quirk because of the way they tried to take the fight to Leclerc. So I think Piastri, by his own admission, had a slightly untidy qualifying. He was a little bit disappointed, but P3, P4, that's a good result for McLaren. You can't really see them having done much better. Samarth, let's talk about Mercedes now, because
I mean, they could have made the car maybe more better.
George Russell would have been 7th had he not crashed on the penultimate lap. Lewis Hamilton retired with loss of oil pressure on lap 16. Hamilton was very negative, wasn't he, about where Mercedes was after qualifying. What exactly is going wrong there?
Yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton wears his heart on his sleeve, and you can kind of tell when he's not happy. And this weekend, I don't think there was a single point where he entered the media pen happy.
I enjoyed his one-word answer to your first question. He was much more eloquent after that, but
yes,
that's when you could tell.
How are you feeling after your qualifying performance? Good. Well, fair enough. I mean, brevity's the soul of wit, right?
Good.
So he's done well there.
We thought he'd generously given a nice soft starting question,
Yeah.
which is just a bit of politeness.
Yeah. Well, I try and be polite. But yeah, so back to Mercedes issues. I mean, I think we were saying during pre-season testing, that Mercedes hadn't got its cards in order, and I think the case is still similar to that. I think that they still quite haven't understood why the rear is so unstable on that car, and it generally does look like quite an unstable car. I mean, Mark, I don't know if you agree with that, but it looks like the rear, and I'm not going to say that's the reason for George Russell's crash. I know there are other factors there. Actually, it looked like there was dirty air there where George Russell kind of ran off and he couldn't get the car quite turned in, and when you're in the wake of another car, that can happen. So I don't think that's because of Mercedes issues, but rear end instability seems to be the problem. And now there's an engine problem to boot.
Yeah, I said certain inconsistency in it. There were certain conditions through the weekend where it was actually quite a quick car. But as soon as the wind changed direction or it came up, suddenly the balance was gone, and then it was using the tyres in a different way, and they couldn't find the sweet spot again. So it's a very tricky car, very capricious, and it's just it seems to have them tearing their hair out. They do seem a little bit lost.
Yeah, and they can't quite run it really close to the ground. That's another problem. So again, in corners like, I'm not saying that was the reason why George crashed, but in corners like that, that's where Mercedes can really suffer. So, we're still seeing that problem. And I think preseason testing was a bit of a mess for them, really. They were trying to understand things. They were changing the suspension layout a little bit on the front to kind of aid anti-dive. And all these things speak to the fact that maybe they haven't understood this car at all, or at least the platform that they're running. And that's why they're so far behind Red Bull.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it is clearly essentially a clean sheet. The first 2 years of this regulation set, it was essentially the same concept of car. This is a clean sheet. And Red Bull's
the
on
clean sheet.
The third iteration of it. So yeah.
Yeah, Toto Wolff after the race he was trying to put some kind of positivity on it, but there was also a fair bit of negativity. He said we've had this physics problem for a few years, and the thing that worries me is that I don't see an end to it at this stage because they've done a lot of work on trying to understand this. We know roughly where the problem is. They seem not to be on top of the science of the car when it's running very low to the ground, and you end up with this car that's theoretically able to work very, very well, but ultimately in the real world it doesn't correlate well. So there are all sorts of questions. People are asking him about, well, Aston Martin use your wind tunnel, do they have the same problems?
No.
And sort of going round and round, but no kind of definitive directions, because that's the question I asked Wolf. I said, right, well, you've been chasing this, so just from a management perspective, how do you shift the parameters of what's being looked for in order to find the answer? And it just paints the picture of a team that just doesn't know exactly where to look.
I'm just curious, is that no blame culture kind of line started being put out again? Because I remember when they were winning, there was a no blame culture of the team, but I wonder if that will start to shift when they continuously hit these problems.
I mean,
the no blame culture gets tested more when things don't go well, but I don't think you can. I don't know whether you'd agree, Mark, but I don't think you could say there's one individual who's at fault, because it's very easy to point.
No, but some people are making a mistake, or everyone is making a mistake.
Technical director James Allison is a very, very accomplished and intelligent character. He knows what he's doing, so it's not that you need to change technical leadership, but that something just needs to shift in the collective philosophy and mentality. And I think that's because the idea of the no blame culture is you blame the problem, but it's quite hard to blame the problem if you can't fully find it, or rather you can find the problem but you can't find that root cause.
Where's it coming from? Yeah, and it could be coming from anywhere. It could be coming from simulation tools. It could be coming from where they're looking at the markers, which markers they're choosing to represent reality, and that can change from one regulation set to another, one car to another. It typically in these sort of situations, there's usually a breakthrough. There's usually a breakthrough in understanding, and quite often it's triggered by something random. It's triggered by something that just didn't add up from something else. And when you dig a bit deeper than that, then you find that, that's going to happen in the short term this year or next year, or who knows.
Yeah, and it's complicated. This is difficult. Yeah. This is very difficult stuff. And their car's not a catastrophe. It's just uncompetitive by their standards. It's still a very quick racing car capable of getting good results, but they desperately need to find that breakthrough, because the longer you go without it, the more you just find yourself sort of grasping in the darkness for it, which is probably what it feels like at times. There. Now, Mark, let's talk about the team that I was going to call AlphaTauri, but of course they're RB now.
No, Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team. It's so easy name.
We have to call.
Then we have Stake F1 team Kicksauber.
Although whenever I mention them, I have to be slightly snidey and derisive about the name. But
why? Because you're a sad loser that can't say the name right. No, come on, it's so easy.
For that team, it was very much a tale of two halves of the garage, wasn't it? Tsunoda had a very strong weekend, qualifying 8th, finishing 7th. Daniel Ricciardo, meanwhile, struggled. So what's Tsunoda doing right that Ricciardo isn't?
I mean, he didn't get his lap deleted. That's one thing. If he didn't do that, he could maybe have points. So I wouldn't say there's any problems with Ricciardo yet.
I mean, it's Tsunoda's basic speed has always been there, as we know. He didn't always have access to it, or couldn't always access it without having sort of wild moments. He's been around long enough now to have got rid of all that, and now you just see the speed. Now, Helmut Marko's question whether the race speed, his question is race speed, because he's sort of fallen out the points at like the first couple of races, but that could just as easily be a kart rate. The trouble is that how you benchmark him when the other driver is clearly having some sort of crisis, because
the crisis. You really talking about Ricciardo? I feel like Lewis Hamilton had a big crisis.
That's not, a Daniel Ricciardo. Red Bull era Daniel Ricciardo level of performance. That's much more like his troubled McLaren time. And, you know, when you're whole tenths off, nearly half a second off, there's something fundamentally wrong. So you can't really...
Yeah, it's big problem. He should be... Yeah, some person that people think... Nowadays, Carloz Sainz that people think will go to Red Bull.
Measure where Tsunoda's at, and it could be that he's operating at a very, very high level, but until we see him along...
I mean, Ricciardo got points last year, so... I believe in him.
Side of a Verstappen or a Leclerc or something like that, it's very difficult to quantify it. And I think he's doing a good job in a car that's tidy, and it's probably the best of that second, the lower half of the field. Yeah, there's a top 5 and a bottom 5 now, isn't there? And it's probably the best of that bottom 5. And yeah, he seems to be able to just squeeze a lot from it and get it into Q3 on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, and I think certainly this weekend there's no obvious extra performance left untapped. Well, there might be a tiny bit of performance, but results-wise, I think that was probably as good as it was going to get for an RB, which is very, very positive. And certainly
Visa Cash App. RB Formula 1 team. Come on now. Learn it.
Daniel Ricciardo was pretty puzzled.
Man, the media team that talk about only Formula 1 all day can say a name right.
After qualifying, saying he's still a bit
spam,
sceptical about the car because he did the lap. Okay, he had his lap time deleted. That meant he fell in Q1. But even then, it was a tenth slower than Tsunoda, which surprised him. And then, well, I was there when he saw the lap time Tsunoda did in Q2, and clearly he was slightly surprised by it. And he admitted, even with track evolution, I know I couldn't do that. And yet, I think I'm driving this car well. And normally when it feels like that, the lap time's there. So I'm a bit worried that he's got stuck in that spiral.
He's not... Why having that talking point?
Of struggle. Again, certainly he's going to need an uptick fairly soon.
March 19th.
Oh, time for some... I believe in a really scam ad, but let's see.
2024, Cairo, Egypt. We are, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, in the last stage of preparing and loading 15 big trailers to be shipped to Gaza people. And this one specifically from a humanity organization.
True.
We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower all of them with His mercy, Ameen. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Was that all? What did you empty boxes? Or what did you promote it?
This electric nail clipper is not only suitable for adults, but also tailor-made for children. You can safely use it to trim your children's nails, and it won't scratch the flesh. Compared with traditional nail clippers, our electric nail clippers have a smoother polishing function and will not scratch the skin, making your nails more supple and beautiful. Trim and polish in one step. In addition, its unique built-in light design provides you with a clearer vision, allowing you to clearly see every detail, ensuring the accuracy and safety of trimming. Best of all, it also automatically stores powder, making it easy to clean. Choose this electric nail clipper to make your nail trimming more convenient and safer, and get a more satisfying manicure effect. It's an ideal choice for nail care for your elderly parents, children, or yourself.
Yeah, true.
Let your nails shine softly and beautifully, and enjoy the convenience and beauty.
100% not Chinese ad.
Samarth, Haas, their great start to the season got even better. Unexpected double points finish.
Fucking man, that's depressing. Williams could have 2 races now with points, but Haas is ruining it.
So how do they go from a disappointing qualifying to Nico Hülkenberg finishing 9th and Kevin Magnussen 10th?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say it was a disappointing qualifying. I think it was Kevin Magnussen 14th and Nico Hülkenberg 16th, but he was impeded by Sergio Perez, which actually ended up shaping the race a little bit because Perez got that penalty. But Haas did really well to get points out of that, I think. And the team has made no secret, firstly, of prioritizing race pace over qualifying pace, because the logic is that, like last year, when you qualify well, you can only fall backwards if your race pace isn't good enough. Now they're trying to work on obviously not falling backwards and falling forwards, or at least staying in one space. This analogy has only got so many legs on it, so I'm just going to continue with this.
Staying upright.
Staying
on
upright.
two legs.
It's good, yeah. So Hülkenberg started on hard, and then he pitted during the virtual safety car, which is it's not a free pit stop, it's a big advantage. That was when Hamilton had his engine failure. And then on newer tyres than Magnussen, he was sent ahead of Magnussen. They swapped the two drivers to then pick off Albon. And I think it was just a solid day for Haas. And Komatsu was pretty happy with it. But he did say that Suzuki could be really hard for the team.
That car's not great in the high speed.
Oh, hopefully this is true. So Visa catch up RB Formula 1 team and Williams Racing. Will get some points.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to say it's a false dawn. I think they've done really well to kind of get on top of the issues of last year with tyre wear. But Suzuka's a real test for tyres, and Haas in the high speed as well. So it's going to be a really tough race for them. They've done really well today, though, I must say. Really impressive.
Well, they've already picked up 4 points, which is 4 points more than some were predicting.
I mean, look at this. This is just depressing. They have 4 points. Williams have 0 points. Even more depressing maybe for Alpine. Man. McLaren 55. Sainz number. Is this proof that Sainz will go to McLaren soon? Surely it is. And the best part. I mean, is it this beautiful Lance Stroll? More points than Lewis Hamilton. And Tsunoda and Behrman 2 points off Lewis Hamilton. It's a great start for Lewis Hamilton.
They might get all season, and that car's handy in the races. It's absolutely there. It's not suffering from those problems. So all credit to them. Let's now, Mark, talk about Williams. Big talking point this weekend. Alex Albon finished a frustrating 11th on what was a difficult weekend for that team. Of course, he damaged his chassis on Friday, which led to Logan Sargent being parked for Saturday and Sunday. Could you argue the fact Albon didn't get among the points proves it was the wrong decision and they shouldn't have?
Oh my god, this talking point, wrong decision. If he got points, was it the right decision? Yes, it's always the right decision, not the wrong decision because they didn't succeed.
Deprived Logan Sargent of a car for reasons of his teammate crashing?
I wouldn't want to take on that argument in the debating society, or, you know, if I was hired to be counsel, I'd be very reluctant to take that one on. I think they did the entirely logical thing, even though it was unfortunate for Logan. I think, you know, you're fighting for very, very valuable points. That part of the constructors' table, and he's your best bet of getting 1 or 2 points. And so,
wait, what?
Yeah, he was pushing to make a mediocre car do something that it was reluctant to do, and he paid the consequence, or Logan Sargent paid the consequence of Alex trying to do that. But yeah, that's just how it is, really. And that's just where the car's at. And when you get beyond the car's level so regularly as Alex does, I don't think it's fair to be critical when you occasionally go over it and have damage. I think that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, racing drivers crash. I mean, it was a bad mistake given they had no spare chassis, but mistakes happen. Albon himself after the race said, I'm not particularly happy with my weekend, obviously starting with that. But actually, if you look at his race, he got the car into the points at one stage, but it just did not have the pace. They tried to hang on.
The problem could have pitted too early. because at least that was Alex Albon said that they pitted early and then to maybe to do something in the early race, but that didn't help them in the end. It just made it worse for them.
Onto it by being aggressive with an early start, and it was just always fighting competitive gravity, wasn't it? And I think Williams made a very good choice there. They could easily have hidden from that choice, but there were points on offer for the lower down teams today, and they gave themselves the best chance by backing Albon. That's just the reality of it. But yeah, they need to get a spare chassis out. Obviously, they're patching up that one for Suzuka. They're hoping to have the third chassis, so they've got a spare for the Chinese Grand Prix that follows Suzuka. So lots of work to be done there. And now, for the third time in 3 races, it's time for a trip to a very special place.
Welcome to Valtteri Bottas Sympathy Corner.
Oh my god, so this will for stake F1 team Kick Sauber will not have a fun day.
And today we're sympathetic for Bottas because he was in a position to score on a weekend where he performed very well, only to have his race ruined by another Sauber pit stop disaster and finish 14th. So, Mark, what do you think Valtteri has to do to catch a break?
Yeah, it's out of his hands, isn't it? I mean, this is
the biggest thing, Sauber need to remove the stake because they are gambling on the pit stops are losing them a lot of points. So they need to stop doing this gambling sponsorship because, it doesn't look good when you lose. If you win, sure, it will look super good, but they're not winning, they're losing a lot. So stop with this gambling.
It's a
sponsor.
Fundamental engineering problem with the wheel nuts, and they're having to be redesigned. And yeah, he just happens to be in that car when Timo's got this problem. And Joe Guan Yu suffered for the same problem also. So all sympathy for Valtteri, but again, as usual.
Yeah,
nothing he could have done about it.
True.
Yeah, it just seems to happen, doesn't it? And yeah, unfortunate for the third time this season in 3 races, Sauber had those pit stop problems. They've got some work to do. I think it's going to be a few races before they've got that solved. But yeah, actually a really good weekend, I thought, from Valtteri Bottas. He was performing very, very well. They had a new front wing on that car. Joe's front wing was damaged in qualifying. He had to revert to the old spec. He just ran a tiny bit wide, just a tiny bit, and just damaged the wing. He was incredibly unlucky because he was on to join Bottas in Q2 before that happened. So yeah, a tough weekend for Sauber, and of course.
Oh my god, it could have been maybe 2 scoring points for Sauber. Then giving the points to Haas, man. It's bad, man.
Bottas in Australia, very much his second home now.
At Care of Car, we help men discover their personal
we can skip this out.
while making smart investments in quality.
Well, as always, it's time now to turn the floor over to the Race Members Club for questions about the Australian Grand Prix. Thanks, as always, to our many members. And if you're interested in joining for the many benefits that includes asking questions on our race review podcasts, an ad-free environment on our website and much more, click the link in the description. And remember, you can also sign up through Apple Podcasts. Loads of questions we've received today. As we've done for the past few races, we've got some we'll save to address in the midweek podcast as well. But let's pile into what we can here. Samarth, you're first up. Oscar Robledo, regular questioner, says, does the decision by Williams to give Sargent's car to Albon spell the end of Sargent's career, and could we see a driver change this year?
Thanks, Oscar. Good question, that. I think it's going to dent his confidence quite a lot, and I think dent is a polite way to put it. That must be a really tough thing for a driver to go through. I would say maybe it's a bit far-fetched to say that we could have a driver change this year. Williams would perhaps have to pay the rest of his contract off, and it might not be worth doing that because you then have to put in...
Yeah, be quiet. We need to figure something out. This side should have glass, and then that side will glass, so both this side will have a stone side, right? Yeah, stone sign. Okay, back
New
to
driver in this car, get them up to speed very quickly in the middle of a season. That's a very tough ask, especially if that new driver might be someone quite young. So I'd say that it won't happen this year. Could it be announced for next year? Yeah.
Oh wait, who they're talking about?
Apps have to pay the rest of his contract off, and it might not be worth doing that because
The fuck they're talking about, man? Fuck me.
that must be a really tough thing for a driver to go through. I would say maybe it's a bit far-fetched to say that we could have a driver change this year. Williams would perhaps have to pay.
Okay, this year. Wait, this year? Yeah, it will be this year for next year.
The rest of his.
So, I mean, I believe mostly Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent will be the ones that will leave
Contract off, and it might not be worth doing that because you then have to put a new driver in this car, get them up to speed very quickly in the middle of a season. That's a very tough ask, especially if that new driver might be someone quite young. So I'd say that it won't happen this year. Could it be announced for next year? Yes, possibly, and maybe that's what the question was getting at. So, I think there's every chance that Sargent he won't be at Williams next year. I just think he's struggled a bit. He's off the pace, and if the decision that James Vowles and Williams made is anything to go by, they're not that confident in his ability compared to Albon.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the bottom line is, harsh as it is on Logan Sargent because it wasn't his fault, there's 24 race weekends of evidence prior to that decision being made that said Albon was the better bet. And Sargent, as we've talked about before, he shows flashes of promise but has yet to really fully coalesce into realising that potential, and obviously that's what he needs to do over the rest of the season. Mark, a question from Flavio, who says, I'd love to hear more discussion about the trouble at Mercedes. More than technical difficulties, I want to know what the leadership is doing and what team morale is like at this point. This is the third year of one fiasco after another. Mercedes has reduced itself to a solid midfielder team by now.
Is this Flavio that's managing Fernando Alonso? I was wondering.
There's no hint. It doesn't say Flavio B. It doesn't say Flavio from Italy. It's unclear. It's unclear. If he sent in audio for the question for us to include, it would be very easy to pick out if it's the Flavio.
His question is, what is Mercedes doing?
Yeah, true. What are they doing? I mean, 3 years and they're still bad. What's feeling good?
Well, yeah, just what's the morale like? What effect is this scenario having on them?
I think everybody's probably desperately trying to find their way to the light, and I'm sure it's not a great place to be at the moment, and they will be trying very, very hard to keep a sense of unity and purpose while getting the.
I mean, what unity can you have if Lewis Hamilton is leaving really soon? I mean, what a great unity you have.
These regular dispiriting outcomes every couple of weekends.
Fuck me.
So, yeah, not nice.
It's
just part of the competitive grind that all teams go through. And it'll make it, coming out the other end, if and when that happens, feel sweeter. But it won't be an enjoyable place to be at the moment. There'll be lots of resolution and digging deep and all that, but which will ultimately should prove satisfying when it turns around. But
true.
I don't imagine it's much fun there at the moment.
Next question I'll take from Dave Smith, who said,
the fuck did he even say? Unity and... I mean, couldn't you go on in more deep in that? I mean, whatever they do this year will then almost be thrown out because Lewis Hamilton will leave. And what morale do you have when you maybe could go to Ferrari and make them great again? With Lewis Hamilton, like even more stuff that can make this unity collapse. But the media have already seen that the Red Bull is already collapsing and it's already the doomsday there. So Red Bull will probably collapse before
says, what's causing Sauber's continual pit stop issues, and where would you see them in the pecking order pace-wise without them? And Andy Sally asks, can they redesign the wheel nut or possibly use last year's design? Well, the problem, it's not operator failure or anything. It's not down to the pit crew. It is down to the wheel nuts, and it's specifically the way the wheel nuts behave when the temperature rises in race conditions. It's an incredibly difficult thing to replicate.
It's so difficult. So 9 teams out of 10 have succeeded, right? No. Okay.
Mainly replicate it in race pit stops. They have managed to a little bit the rest of the time, but it's really frustrating for them because they did massively dial back the pit stops just to really try and make sure they were going to work. So they were going to be losing a few seconds, I think.
Or is it really hard to make a Formula 1 car? Yeah, but Red Bull succeeded, so and Mercedes failed.
Stops, well, and did in the ones that went well. But still, Chevy Pujolar, their head of trackside engineering, said they'd gone through the weekend and it was going fine. And then they had the first pit stop with Bottas, and he said, "Oh," and I just thought, no. So they've done what they can, and yeah, it is down to the wheel nuts, and specifically being the metallurgy of the wheel nuts, and they are going to be replaced. They are being redesigned, but it just takes time to produce them because it's not just knocking it together. You've got to, make and cure these parts in clever ways. So it sounds like it's going to be 3 or 4 races before they have that proper solution in place.
3 and 4 races. So 1 more race or no more races left to do before they succeeded.
So it's going to be countermeasures
nice.
Up until then, which is very unfortunate. And of course, they've upgraded their pit equipment this year, so it should be an improvement. But every time they make a pit stop, they're going to be holding their breath just in case this happens. And yeah, it's cost them points today, which is a real problem because they can't afford to leave points on the table. So, Martha, a question from Jack Aitken. That's the Australian Jack Aitken, who says, on an alternate timeline, is there a different pit strategy that could have got Oscar Piastri onto the home podium?
Thanks for your question, Jack. So essentially, I think Mark mentioned it earlier, actually, in the podcast, but Oscar Piastri was used almost to kind of not persuade, he was used... Apply pressure, let's say apply pressure. You don't persuade people during races.
He aggressively lobbied.
Aggressively lobbied Charles Leclerc into pitting earlier. So Oscar Piastri was pitted on lap 9 from medium tyres, and then Leclerc followed suit to cover that off. Norris then went longer on his first stint until lap 14, and he had better pace and they swapped him around with Piastri again. So Norris actually had better race pace anyway, and I think part of why he got the podium was the strategy. So if they didn't put Piastri on that strategy, I don't think McLaren would have got the podium in first place. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think the only way you could have got Piastri on the podium would have been to deliberately compromise Norris's race, which there's no logic to that. He was the faster driver.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just another one of those frustrating things where, once again, in the World Championship era, no Australian driver on the podium at home, but close. Oscar Piastri with 4th place. The question now I'll take from Kenny Stoltz, who says Leclerc and Hamilton both seem to struggle to adapt to car balance changes where Sainz thrives. Did Ferrari make the wrong call giving up Sainz, who delivers in precisely the situations where
Are they regretting? I mean, who is this fans they always talk about? Have Ferrari regretted taking Lewis Hamilton?
Leclerc struggles. Next year, will Ferrari be able to produce a car that will make both drivers happy? Well, I think they're still... Leclerc and Hamilton are both adaptable. I think Leclerc, as we discussed earlier, can get a little bit confused by some of these tyre challenges, the things that Sainz excels in. But Hamilton's a very sharp driver when it comes to that sort of thing. I certainly think it won't be a problem to produce a car that will suit both drivers. They're not super extreme in their driving style and their car demands. They do approach things slightly differently, but they're not polar opposites or anything. And no, I'm not going to say it's the wrong call to give up on Sainz, because I don't think they did give up on Sainz.
I mean, it can't be Lewis Hamilton fans, or is it Lewis Hamilton fans? They want him be still in Mercedes. No, this is so
Sainz.
weird.
I think they just believed in Lewis Hamilton a little bit more, which you can completely understand. But I do think Sainz is a loss, just because he's such a great driver to have around in any team. Certainly, I wouldn't question the decision. Lewis Hamilton, you have to consider an upgrade. The only area where arguably is on age. Well, that's not even arguable, is it? He is a chunk older than Sainz. But yeah, I think that'll work. But there will be days next year when Ferrari will probably think, do you know what, if we had Carloz in the car, this is the kind of weekend where we could have really done with him. I think that will happen. So after a question from Ollie Emerson, who says, aside from an exceptional performance from the two drivers, how much credit do Ferrari deserve for their strategy and pit stops? So often lamented for both in previous years, they were the class of the field today.
Cheers, Ollie. I would say that when you do things right, people don't really think you've done anything at all. I think I'm paraphrasing Futurama there, actually, Ed. But genuinely, I think Ferrari didn't put a foot wrong today. And yeah, they deserve credit for that. And when you see other teams putting feet wrong, for example, Sauber, and you know, they didn't have the perfect pit stops today, you can really see how wrong it can go when you just don't do things the way they should be done. And in Formula One, it's quite hard to do that during a race condition. We also saw Red Bull with their issues. Mercedes had issues. So other teams really kind of, I wouldn't say drop the ball, that's a bit harsh, but other teams had like Sundays that weren't ideal today. And Ferrari really pulled it off. And it shows how much you have to do to get a 1-2 finish. I mean, it cannot be underestimated how much Red Bull are doing right week in, week out to maintain that level of performance. And Ferrari put in Red Bull-esque performance today, I think. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and I think part of the credit...
Wait, not Mercedes' performance? Wasn't Mercedes the standard to do a great job?
For that does go to Fred Vasseur. He's calmed everything down there in his just over a year in charge there, and yeah, converting that into a 1-2. But there are times where you can imagine we'd be sat here on this podcast talking about a 1-2 that was thrown away by Ferrari. So really the strength was, as you say, they didn't do anything wrong. They nailed it when they needed to. Mark, a question from Nevin Knowles, who says, why does the Ferrari seem to not gain performance throughout quali? First in Bahrain and now in Australia. The car looks to be okay in Q1 and Q2, but didn't take the usual leap you would expect for Q3, with the drivers complaining about the front not being as strong. I saw they may have changed the setup from FP2 to move more performance to the rear. Is this the case, or simply outside factors such as temperature and wind throwing the car out of its window?
Hi Nevin, yeah, interesting set of questions. I think there's a lot going on there actually. One of them is that the Ferrari has quite a wide sweet spot, so you tend to see them getting straight into it earlier than you see other cars. Even the Red Bull takes longer. The Mercedes, sometimes they don't find it at all.
What do you mean they don't find it at all? Surely they do. Just take 3 years and then maybe.
McLaren takes longer to get that sweet spot. Often takes all the sessions before they're anywhere near happy with it. Same with the Red Bull. The Ferrari is straight into it, so there's not as much headroom left to make it better at the end. I think that's one of the things that's going on. And yes, it has a certain way of using the tyres that it depends what the demands of a particular track are. But generally, the more grip you have, the more understeer you will get. So you have to keep rebalancing the car for that. So the Ferrari is not, it's got quite a nice slow corner balance. It's very good in the mechanical corners. And so there's not usually all that much to do. You just sort of take the strength that it's got and run with it really. It's a slightly...
So they can't improve. They set a great standard and then they can't improve above on it.
It's slightly different in its traits to the other cars, and I think that's what you're seeing, rather than it being any reflection on the abilities of the people operating it.
And the next question from Lewis Murphy I'll take, who asks, is Danny Rick proving himself to be less of an option for Red Bull's senior team? Yuki Tsunoda looks comprehensively stronger than him in the V-carb. Has his lack of adaptability stuck with him from his McLaren struggles? Yes, I think he is proving himself to be less of an option for Red Bull's senior team. He's not on a trajectory to be worth putting in there.
no to McLaren stays.
At the moment, yes, Tsunoda does look comprehensively stronger than him. And yeah, I think the lack of adaptability is still there. He hasn't adapted well to these cars. And I think he's now edging to...
I mean, I believe I saw a really great drive from him in Mexico last year. So, yeah, but I don't cover every news, so who knows?
Towards a bit of a crisis point, because he was talking about, I think there's something wrong with this car. They've already gone over that car after Saudi with a fine-tooth comb and found a few little bits and pieces, albeit they said not enough to explain his qualifying deficit there. And I think Ricciardo might be in that point where he's like, oh no, if there's not something I can find, then it's probably me.
Yeah, I think far from, is he on a trajectory still to be in the Red Bull? I would say, is he on a trajectory still to stay in the RB?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. In fact, we've got a question now for Samarth on that from Lachlan Babbage, who says, as an Australian, it pains me to ask this, but what reason can you see to keep Daniel Ricciardo in a Red Bull affiliated seat next year? Watching his lack of pace...
Next year? Is Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team part of that? Then I believe he will stay there.
Compared to a teammate yet again is beginning to make me think he's drifting towards a small collection of drivers that could be seen as wasting a seat. I really do think a Liam Lawson or even an Isaac Hadjar could be doing a better job.
No.
Discuss.
Thanks. Oh, discuss. Nice.
Discuss,
Thanks,
yeah.
Lachlan. Yeah, well, I will discuss.
A full essay, please.
Talk.
I like it. Well, if you're part of the members club, I think it gives you free reign to say that. Fair enough. And yeah, it is a shame, actually. He seems a bit dented, his confidence as well. He seems... I wouldn't say resigned, but his body language is kind of getting there now, and he knows what's at stake. It's a long season, it's a long season, and there is time to turn it around. I'm sure he's definitely going to try. But this has been a less than ideal start to the season for Daniel Ricciardo. With Yuki Tsunoda performing so well, yeah, there's little case for him to stay. And actually, Mark, you just touched on that. Or you literally just said that, to be honest, and I think it was a very good point. Is there much of a case keeping him at RB? And Isaac Hadjar had a really good weekend in Formula 2, actually. So I think, he deserves a shout out for that. He was solid, really solid. I mean, class of the field in the feet.
Wait, solid. Let's see, where do we have Formula 2? I mean, he could have a solid race, but the sprint race, he ruined. He did, he got penalty by it, so he didn't win the sprint race. And then he won the race mostly because he was the last one that did the pit stop under a safety car or something. That made him get a lot of free position. So if Dennis Hugger didn't crash out, he will probably not finish the race P1, unless win the race.
Feature race, barely put a foot wrong. Yeah, he got a bit lucky with strategy because he had like a bit of a free pit stop during virtual safety car, but he was...
Oh, yeah, a free pit stop. He didn't put... No, sure.
Really solid, and his kind of mentality seems up there. I genuinely think he's a solid product. And of course, Liam Lawson's waiting in the wings there. I think it's a matter of time, basically, unfortunately. But at least you have Oscar Piastri.
That's good news for the Australian fans. Yeah, I think we are on the current trajectory. I think it's a question of when Ricciardo gets replaced by Lawson this season, not if. It can be changed, and it's not something I particularly want to see happening, but you can't justify keeping Daniel Ricciardo in that seat based on how good he was 5 years ago. And he was an outstanding Formula 1.
Oh, so almost like Lewis Hamilton. It's, let's say 2022, 2023, now 24, that's 3 years. And let's see, 2025, could that be a good year for him? Probably not. And that's done 4 years. So Lewis Hamilton's soon up there.
Driver, maybe that's still in him again, but we're getting quite a big sample set of data across multiple cars, unfortunately. So he will know better than anyone that he needs to he needs to find the answer, and very, very quickly. Mark, a question from Gareth Coleman, who says, is Lewis Hamilton's current form starting to get concerning? Hamilton has started...
Yeah, true. Let's see. What do they say? The race.
To consistently get outperformed by Russell since the start of the season, which on the surface looks concerning. Is this similar to 2022, where he was experimenting more with setup, or does Russell just have more pace in his car?
He is experimenting more with setup again, as he was in 22, not doing so much last year. So there is that, but you're right. He's, George has been the more consistently quick driver in qualifying, and it's got to be a concern. It's not. I'm not looking at it saying, "Oh, this is it. This is age catching up with him" or anything like that. But I think it's got to be a concern for Lewis and himself, because that question's always hanging about at the back of your mind as you get older. And I mean, he even said it in his interview with us last year. He said, you're only human. You do sometimes ask yourself, is it me? Is it really all the car, or is it me? So he will be asking himself those,
it's 100% you.
From a day where the car has given him all the messages he needs, and he's absolutely devastating, and all those doubts will just be evaporate, and then he'll be off on another level again. But I think the further into your career you get, and the older you get, the more these things will tend to weigh on you. The normal, just the waves of form will sort of weigh down a little bit.
And it's very, very difficult to untangle any fluctuations there in the driver form when you're in a team that's fluctuating so much. And they've talked about having fluctuations from one side of the garage to the other on race weekends over the past few years. So it's been really strange. I think the thing that's probably most telling is during qualifying they had the head-to-head, didn't they, of Hamilton to Russell. I think it's just a pure who qualifies better. We tend to discount ones where a fair comparison hasn't been made or someone's had a problem. But it's basically dead even, isn't it, between him and Russell over their stint as teammates. So, it's far from the case that Russell's destroying him or anything, although he has out-qualified him all 3 times this season. So interesting to keep track of. Final question I'll take from Danny Elliott. Do you have any further thoughts on Albon's race today? Will the team be happy with 11th, considering a few usual top 10 finishers had DNFs, and that was a potential opportunity missed? Well, it's quite an interesting one. As we said earlier, Albon performed really well in that race, I think. I don't think there was much more.
The team could maybe have done a better job if pitting him later would have solved the point question.
Pace wasn't there, so it was a potential opportunity missed, but because the car didn't have as much pace as it needed to make the most of that opportunity, the opportunity that was taken by RB and that was taken by Haas, who are the kind of natural enemies of Williams there. So the question there is, well, what's missing? And they struggled a bit with the tyres this weekend as well. So there's some things that will concern them about that car, on top of the fact they're a little bit behind with development. Upgrades are going to be further delayed by the accident as well, and they need to build up more spares and get the chassis patched up. So I think that's what will worry them most about the potential opportunity. Not they can look at today and say, right, today we should have been in the points because we had the pace. It's more like, actually, this reflects the fact we're not quite as strong as we need to be to take advantage of these opportunities, and that could last for a few more races. Unfortunately, it's a long, hard road back for them, and it's going to be a tough battle in terms of points on the table for those bottom 5 teams, certainly on current form. Well, thanks as always to Samarth and Mark for your company. There'll be loads to read on our website as always, and I'll be speaking to Gary Anderson soon for another episode of the Race F1 Tech Show. Plus, we've got a load of YouTube videos in the pipeline for your viewing pleasure. But now
that's a big lie. I mean, just show this was not a view pleasure, or fuck you said. And like I mentioned before, their Alonso Madness drive was also really bad. Man, biggest joke ever, the race. Let's see. No. We end this with some more fun stuff than F1 Nation podcast. And that is with
Vilken ost?
Oh god damn it, add Eden Milward. When the ads is done, then we can see what fun gear stuff he have to say about it. Well, let's say. God damn it, one more ad. Now we can go, and it's faster than you can blink. A history of Formula 1 gearbox construction.
If you've been a consumer of this channel's work for some time, you'll notice that ideas come from all over the place because the internet is a brilliant place. Sometimes it can just be something random that pops up that makes you go, ooh, that's interesting, or how did it get to this point? Places like Matt Bishop's Twitter page. He's always posting things like statistics, trivia, and all sorts, or it could just be something that started randomly as a discussion on Discord. You know the sort of thing I mean, when you're not actively looking for stuff but you end up talking about it anyway, and then it starts a discussion where you end up doing all those in-depth Google searches because you want to know the answers. At least, I do. Can't go to sleep without knowing because it'll keep me up all night. Yeah, I know, it's weird. And that's where the idea for this video started. Discord. It was just one of those throwaway conversations I had with somebody that ended up leading to me making this video. And it was all about the construction of gearboxes for some unknown reason. When did they start using this material? When did they start using this material? Were they trying this? Were they trying that? And how it all led to the directions they went in, whether that's exotic materials or design or things like that. So yeah, strap in because this one's going to be a bit geekier than normal. So, we go back to the beginning. Cars in pre-war Grand Prix racing were a far cry from the utterly insane bits of engineering that they are now. Tyres that had the contact patch of a 10-pence coin, 400-litre engines that could only produce 90 horsepower, and then it all evolved into the early years of the Formula 1 World Championship that began in 1950. Take this Maserati 250F for instance. This car originally shipped with a 4-speed gearbox made by Maserati, but then switched to a 5-speed made by Stearnsy that would have allowed for a few extra advantages. For one, first gear wouldn't have to be so long, so better acceleration off the line, and better acceleration out of corners because downshifting would be a more optimal thing to do. These things were basic, cars and gearboxes, but they did the job. The technology just wasn't there. But as the sport began to evolve, so did the different ways that the engineers started trying to push that envelope. By the mid-1960s, most of the privateer entrants or garagista teams were running gearboxes made by Hewland. This is a name you might have heard me use a few times over the episodes of this series, as I have referred to, on multiple occasions, the plucky privateer starter pack. Customer chassis, usually from March, a Cosworth DFV, and a Hewland gearbox. With the advent of the Cosworth DFV coming in 1967 and then being opened up to all the teams in 1968 because Ford wanted a bigger market share of the Formula 1 grid, a Hewland gearbox mated to a DFV was the combo to have. Whether that was by design, Cosworth wanted them mated up to those gearboxes, or that's what they had lying around when they did the prototypes, or that's what Lotus were using when they started testing the engine, I don't know, but you wouldn't put it past them for it to be all three of those things. By that time, though, things had changed ever so slightly. Hewland, which had been formed in 1957, was building bespoke gearboxes that all the teams loved, and were coming as standard with 5 forward gears and 1 reverse. And, as far as I can tell, it was clutch up and clutch down with heel and toe to save on the gearbox, given how many times a Formula 1 car would change gear over the course of a Grand Prix. I did find a very brief onboard of Jim Clark going round Brands Hatch that came from 1964, and he definitely drops his left leg down to change up between Druids and Graham Hill Bend, but that's not to say he didn't do it at any other point on the track. But at the same time, there's no synchros on those boxes, so lift and slam TM is still possible if you know what you're doing, so it could just be driver preference. The actual information is quite hard to come by. And I discussed all this briefly on the video I did about Ferrari's first ever flappy paddle gearbox, so I'll keep it brief. On the way back down, the drivers would use heel and toe, rev matching, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that the engine didn't explode when dropping down a gear. It also meant that the car was going to be much more under control as it went down the box, as the torque being sent to the rear wheels as the engine peaked wouldn't spin the rears up. In the mid-1970s, Hewland's gearboxes were still being used up and down the grid, but Ferrari had another idea as they modified the 312 for the 1975 season. Mauro Forghieri was intent on keeping the weight of the Ferrari down and also keeping a decent centre of mass for handling. So during the 1974 season, Forghieri had worked on a transverse gearbox instead of a longitudinally mounted one. The mass was kept in one place and it also reduced yaw, as the mass on the 312 in 1975 was contained completely within the wheelbase. So you'd think then that everybody would have copied this pretty quickly, but it was only a quick copy from some of the teams before some began reverting. With the advent of ground effect, which required narrower gearboxes, teams would go back to a longitudinally mounted gearbox to allow for the bigger Venturi tunnels, although it appears that Brabham was able to make a transverse gearbox small enough to allow for the Venturi tunnels to do their thing. Hewland was still supplying gearboxes even at this time because the vast majority of the teams were still using DFEs, although that was going to change as they entered the turbo era. They were cheap, easy to maintain, reliable, and, well, all the teams loved them. But when ground effect was banned at the end of 1982, they started to revert back to these longitudinally mounted gearboxes because of the way the design philosophy was changing. But Enrique Scalabroni, who was at Williams, and Dave Wass and Paul Crux at Benetton, managed to come up with the inboard transverse gearbox. Lightweight, compact, and could still do the job. These boxes also contained dog rings that would allow drivers to more efficiently do the lift and slam technique that I discussed before. They'd now be in a position where, if they needed to, could clutchlessly, that's not even a word but I'll still run with it, downshift, only using the right foot for rev matching. Or do what Senna did at Monaco, where he would clutch and drop the thing down straight from 6th to 2nd. So by this point, the shifts were much faster than they had been previously. I'll leave a clip in the description to Alex Rossi driving a Lotus 49 at COTA as part of a demo run, or it might have been part of a race weekend, I can't remember, but he is definitely dropping his left leg to clutch up on the gear shifts and then heel and toe on the way down. There's also a clip of Senna from 1989, I think it is, at Suzuka, where he's changing gears so fast just by lifting and slamming, he might as well have had a flappy paddle gearbox. Speaking of, John Barnard at Ferrari around that same time had designed a revolutionary flappy paddle gearbox. I've covered this in detail in its own video, so I won't go into too much detail again because it'll be stuff you've already heard before.
Wait, what?
Well, assuming you've already watched that video anyway. Nope. At this same time, transverse gearboxes were still popular but were about to fall out of favour due to changes in car design and the changes that the FIA was going to make in response to the events of Imola 1994. Because the cars ended up being narrower at the rear and had this Coke bottle type rear construction, having narrower, smaller gearboxes was going to be key. Things were going back to a longitudinal design, but the goal now was lighter, smaller gearboxes that were able to handle the abuse needed over the course of a Grand Prix weekend. By 1995, everybody except the 40 team was on a flappy paddle sequential, and in 1996, the days of H-pattern were over. But as just mentioned, a new arms race was beginning. And this is where things do get interesting, because in the 1990s, teams had already begun designing their own in-house bespoke gearboxes specific for their engines and cars, and for the most part they were made out of cast magnesium due to it being lighter than aluminium and having other properties that the teams needed. But who was the first to get a full-on die-cast titanium gearbox casing made? McLaren? No. Williams? No. Ferrari? No. It was Minardi, of all people. Yes, the die-cast titanium case was first used by everybody's favourite minnows in 2000. Now, Ferrari had fabricated one in 1997, but it was astronomically expensive for what it was, as it needed to be welded together in sterile conditions. It was structurally strong, light, and made its debut at the Spanish Grand Prix that year, while before this, attempts had been made using other materials. Again, it was one of the minnows that tried this. John Barnard, who was now at Arrows, had come up with a carbon fibre gearbox casing in 1998. It wasn't particularly reliable, but Barnard believed that once the initial kinks had been ironed out, then it might be something all the teams would be getting on board with. But Barnard himself had never liked the magnesium casings, which, due to the technology of the time, meant that the thickness wasn't exactly uniform, and magnesium begins to reduce in stiffness above 100 degrees Celsius. Titanium was the most logical direction to take this construction in, but this also had its problems, as Ferrari had already found out. Welding it together and doing it in those kind of conditions was really expensive, and die casting it still was a bit expensive and it took longer to do, but at the end of it all, you had a 40% weight saving. So when Barnard...
That's a lot. Maybe Alpine should look this up. Could maybe save them some problems.
Joined Arrows, it was him and Alan Jenkins at Stewart that were looking into employing carbon fibre in the construction of the gearbox casings. Stewart had a very hard time getting theirs to work properly, and although both Stewart and Barnard could get a working example down to around 14 kilos, when Stewart rebranded to Jaguar, they abandoned carbon and went back to the safety of magnesium. But the thing is, we're now in the early 2000s. The mass involvement of manufacturers was going to drive up the costs and the arms race incredibly high, and any advantage the teams could get was going to be huge. Teams now had gearboxes capable of fully automated upshifting, and also had electronic lift and blip systems installed to make sure that the whole thing was as fast as possible. And flappy paddle gearboxes, as much as people don't like them, were here to stay. In 2003, Renault arrived with what is now pretty much the standard for gearbox construction. They were using a titanium lower section of the gearbox and a carbon fibre upper structure that worked okay, but they were back on a fully titanium model for 2004.
Oh my god. So they tried, and now they are they tried to be good, and now they're heavy. Sometimes
and
never
beyond.
lucky.
Today, this is pretty much the construction model. They make the structural bulkheads of the box out of titanium, the rest out of carbon to keep it light, structurally strong, and also deal with any heat dissipation, which carbon fibre is pretty bad at. Going through 2004 and 2005, McLaren and Honda were rumoured to be working on a gearbox that seamlessly shifted between whatever gear you were in and the next gear, but they were sort of oohing and ahhing about running it because of the bans on things like continuously variable transmissions, or CVT boxes, that Williams had trialled in 1993 but never got to run it because, well, the FIA saw what they were doing and said, lol, no. So things were now going in another direction, and this is where Formula 1 currently is. With these boxes at the time, there was no need for a cut on the upshift. They functioned much like the boxes on a V8 supercar or a BTCC car, straight up, straight down, but they would have a distinct drop in revs when they did change up. The efficiency wasn't there, and the box would still take a decent amount of time for the gear to change, at least by these gearbox standards anyway. So teams were looking at ways of reducing that time down so that as little power on upshift was lost. Although it appears at the end of the 2005 season, one of the BAR engineers admitted that they had used a seamless shifting box during the course of that season, which led to Williams designing their own for 2006. So how does it work? Good question. It's exactly as it says on the tin, to be honest. There's no brief moment where the box is in neutral, and it means that everything is just way more efficient in terms of power delivery. Unlike these more modern dual-clutch gearboxes found on road cars, these F1 gearboxes are straight cut, so you're still just slamming it into gear, for want of a better phrase. Formula 1 cars only have one clutch that weighs barely a kilogram. I'm no engineer, so talking about it in all the in-depth detail is going to waste all of our time, and I'm not going to sit and pretend I know how it works.
Thanks.
From what I gather is that they've got two shift drums, one for the odd gears and one for the even gears, so when you pull the paddle, the next gear is always ready to go, no matter what, and you end up changing gear in somewhere between 2 to 4 milliseconds. Faster than you can blink, basically. I mean, it takes, what, about 0.4 of a second to blink, so 4/1000th of a second to change gear. That's pretty quick, and I read somewhere that it's only a drop of about 600 RPM or so, so it's way more efficient than anything they'd had before. And when you've got the hybrids on tap as well, and the turbo in the modern cars, it's just...
What's your biggest challenge to eating healthy?
Oh, there we have him. Earlier we had the other ad when they sat in like a podcast room. And now we have the old ad. The outside, not at all scam ad.
Time, having a busy schedule.
And how do you combat that?
I usually drink milkshakes when I don't have time to cook or meal prep. It doesn't replace a fresh home-cooked meal, but it helps me get complete nutrition even...
Is new half old scam ad.
When I'm in a rush. There's no cooking or waiting, it's just 2 scoops, shake, and that's it.
Any specific brands that you've tried?
Here we have it. Okay, so he's maybe the new scam ad.
I always recommend Plenty Shake by Jimmy Joy. It's developed by dietitians, it has plant protein, all the essential vitamins and minerals, healthy carbs, and so much more. And it's only $1.43 per meal.
Yeah,
wow,
true.
That would actually save me so much time and money.
It does. Jimmy Joy is the easiest way to eat healthy. You gotta try it out.
No. You don't. Wait, let's see.
Level up your gaming space
No.
with metal posters from Displate. Hang your displates in seconds. Swap
That's
them whenever
Stonewall,
you like.
Stonewall.
Get official art from your favorite games on a uniquely designed metal canvas and choose from thousands of posters. Join over 3 million collectors now. Your wall upgrade is here. Shop now at Displate.com.
It's going to be sheer power. So from aluminium gearboxes operated very similarly to how you drive a road car, assuming you have a manual, to these intricate, expensive, high-tech, precision-made, whatever adjectives you want to use, operated from a single paddle that then uses solenoids, actuators and sensors to do all the work in, well, a split second that the human brain just cannot do by itself, and then lasts for 5 races before you can change it, that's a lot of progress. I mean, I do drive a manual. It is fun, but there is something incredible about these flappy paddle sequentials. H-pattern is fun, but flappy paddle is speed. And if you're going to tell a driver that this is the 2023 Red Bull, and this is also a 2023 Red Bull, but this one has an H-pattern and this one has a flappy paddle, they're going to take the flappy paddle one every single time. But you never think about how they're put together and how much of a hammering they take. It would be interesting to see what would happen to one without all of these gizmos. It will probably eat itself alive, and if a driver still had to lift and blip, the car would probably lose control before it ate itself alive. But at the same time, it shows for even the bits that you don't really see on a Formula 1 car, how much design, R&D, money goes into every bit of a Formula 1 car. So then, a look at the history of F1 gearbox construction and the exotic materials used, and the reasons why they went that way. If this has given you food for thought or explained something you might never have thought of otherwise, then do like this video so I know I did a good job, and for more like this, get subscribed with that bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the rad lads at Patreon for the support, and if you want to help keep things running around here, then you can help out by hitting up the link at the bottom of this video that will take you to the Patreon page, or there's my affiliates down there too if you still need some F1 swag for 2024.
No.
There's also links to Discord and socials to connect that way, and memberships and super thanks if that's more your thing. So until next time, I've been Adam Ord, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.
Man, that's interesting. Minardi. Oh, they weren't the first one. Ferrari was the first one, but it was so expensive. So Minardi took up the flame. To pick access left, and then it's time for some repairing in the slowest possible way ever. Let's see. Yeah, Carloz Sainz. If we go from where this stream began. Carloz Sainz is more likely, I would say, go to Mercedes than Red Bull. But something will be interesting. If Mercedes say no, and Red Bull will also say no, would Carloz Sainz maybe go to Williams? I mean, they are better than Stake F1 team. Stake F1 team, Kick Sauber. But would you rather be in Stake F1 team, Kick Sauber? Because maybe more easily to be in the Audi team then when they switch up. Or maybe when you stay, if you stay in Williams, you maybe can see how good the Audi team actually is. Maybe you will be better off in a Williams than in an Audi car. I mean, that would be sad. Hopefully not, but it could be. What do people think on Mercedes? What if Audi for some reason succeed to do a better job than Mercedes? I mean, Mercedes have now, it's the third year and they don't know what to fix. Why is their car bad? They don't know anything. Let's see. And this team, people think Max Verstappen want to go to. Now that would be something. Max Verstappen leaves Red Bull to go to stake F1 team kicks over, because he will want to be there when Audi comes in. That's something. People asking question if Carloz Sainz should waste his career going there and then Max do it. That would be something. But I would say probably some F1 Nation podcast tomorrow. Not until